Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is a whole universe where every word and gesture hides secret meanings, symbols, and strange coincidences. J.K. Rowling created a story in which the smallest details can completely transform how we see familiar scenes. And interestingly, many of these hints have been hiding in plain sight for years. Sometimes they inspire fan theories, some believable, like the explanation of why Hagrid can still perform magic with his umbrella, others completely wild, like what would happen if a Dementor kissed Harry while he still carried a fragment of Voldemort's soul. Today I've gathered 5 unusual details that will make you see the wizarding world in a whole new way, and maybe even question what you thought you knew. Number 1. The Master of Death. After Harry's death, he meets Dumbledore. But why him of all people? Perhaps the answer lies in the ancient legend of the Deathly Hallows. According to the tale, whoever possesses all 3 artifacts, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Invisibility Cloak, becomes the Master of Death. Dumbledore had all 3. He won the wand from Grindelwald, temporarily kept the cloak for James Potter, and obtained the stone shortly before his death. Harry, in turn, inherited the cloak from his father, became master of the wand by disarming Draco Malfoy, and used the stone to meet his parents before his final walk into the forest. You are the true Master of Death, because the true Master does not seek to run away from it. He accepts that he must die and understands that there are far, far worse things in the living world than dying. Albus Dumbledore, Deathly Hallows. Both Dumbledore and Harry met death calmly as an old friend. That's why at King's Cross they met not as student and teacher, but as 2 masters, 2 souls who had come to understand the truth about life and death. Number 2. Bottomless. The extension charm is one of the most fascinating pieces of magic in the wizarding world. With it, a simple bag can hold an entire room. Hermione kept everything in her handbag, from clothes to a tent. Newt Scamander carried an entire zoo inside his suitcase. But have you ever wondered, what happens if such a bag is destroyed? Does everything inside vanish? Or does it all simply spill out? If it's the former, such items could theoretically be used to destroy dangerous objects, like Horcruxes. Place one inside, burn the bag, and the Horcrux vanishes along with the space it occupies. Rowling, unfortunately, never explained this, but the idea that a tiny handbag could contain a whole universe, and that destroying it might unleash a magical explosion, sounds hauntingly fascinating. Number 3. The rules that don't exist. Rowling has admitted that her books contain plenty of contradictions. One of the most curious concerns the so-called limitations of transfiguration, especially regarding food. You can't make food out of nothing. You can only multiply what already exists. Hermione, Deathly Hallows. But if a wizard can endlessly multiply a piece of food, isn't that basically creating it from nothing? In theory, a skilled wizard could feed an entire family with just a crust of bread. Here's where it gets strange. We almost never see wizards buying normal groceries. Diagon Alley sells magical sweets and potions, but not bread or meat. Perhaps in their world, food is truly cheap because it can easily be stamped out with magic. That would explain why even the poor Weasleys never go hungry. But imagine the flip side. If food isn't created but merely copied, what happens when you eat magically transformed meat? Suppose you turn a table into a pig and roast it. Would it become real meat, or remain a magical illusion without any nutrients at all? Number 4. Size doesn't matter. Phileas Flitwick is one of the most underrated heroes in the saga. His small stature, goblin ancestry, and gentle voice make many forget that he's one of the most powerful wizards of his era. He's a master of charms, a wise mentor, and a brave fighter who took part in the Battle of Hogwarts. But here's a fascinating detail. Flitwick is probably immune to being impersonated with Polyjuice Potion. "You're part giant," said Lupin to Hagrid, "and Polyjuice Potion only works on humans." Deathly Hallows. If the potion doesn't work on beings who aren't fully human, then Flitwick, with his goblin blood, is one of the most secure professors at Hogwarts. No one could replace him the way Moody was in Goblet of Fire. Perhaps that's why he always stayed out of the spotlight, yet was the most trustworthy of them all. Number 5. A mother's kindness. The Dursleys embody dullness and fear of the unusual. For them, being normal is a way of life. They're ashamed of their connection to the Potters and despise everything magical. But if you look closely, Petunia Dursley isn't just a cruel aunt. As a child, she envied her sister, longed to attend Hogwarts, and even wrote to Dumbledore asking to be accepted. "I saw his reply. It was very kind," said Lily. Petunia flushed and whispered, "That was my private letter. How dare you?" Tariq Shadim's her hatred was a wound turned into armor. Perhaps when Harry appeared on her doorstep, Petunia wasn't trying to avenge the past, but to protect her own son. She taught Dudley to fear magic so that he would never feel different, the way she once did beside Lily. Harry had to be the abnormal one so that Dudley could stay normal. And in that harshness, strangely there lies a trace of motherly love. Number 6, magic that cannot be learned. Some magic cannot be taught. It doesn't come from books or wands, but from the soul. Severus Snape proved that when he created Sectum Sempra, a curse born not from theory, but from pain, it was the spell of a lonely boy trying to defend himself in a cruel world. No professor could have guided that kind of creation. It came from instinct, emotion, and sorrow. The same is true for Lily Potter's sacrifice. When Dumbledore told Harry, "You are protected by her. It is ancient magic and none can understand it," he wasn't exaggerating. Lily's love didn't follow any law of magic. It rewrote them. It was the kind of power that made Voldemort's logic collapse. This emotional magic runs deeper than spells. It's what fuels every great act in the series. Hermione's intellect saves lives, but it's Harry's compassion that changes hearts. When he spares Peter Pettigrew or refuses to kill Draco, the world itself seems to shift in response. Love, mercy, remorse. These are not weaknesses in Rowling's world. They're the rawest kind of sorcery, unpredictable and unstoppable. Voldemort spent his life searching for the most powerful spell. Dumbledore already knew the truth. The strongest magic is the one that can't be learned, only felt. Number 7, the eternal student. Albus Dumbledore never stopped learning. Even as the most powerful wizard of his age, he remained a student, curious, humble, and haunted. After the tragedy with his sister Ariana, he no longer sought greatness but understanding. Every book he read, every spell he studied, was part of a deeper search, not for power, but for meaning. He once told Harry, "Do not pity the dead, Harry, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." Those words came from experience, not wisdom alone. They were the confession of a man who once lost everything because of ambition and learned that the greatest truth in magic wasn't knowledge, but compassion. In his final years, Dumbledore studied death itself as if it were another subject. He gathered the Deathly Hallows not to master them, but to understand what mastery even meant. He looked for the line where magic ends and the soul begins. That's why he saw death not as defeat, but as a mystery worth exploring. For the well-organized mind, he said, death is but the next great adventure. Dumbledore's legacy isn't measured in spells or victories, It's in his endless curiosity, his refusal to stop asking why. He was a headmaster to others, but a student to life until the very end. Number 8. Hogwarts as a living being. Hogwarts breathes. It shifts its staircases, hides doors, and hums with ancient awareness. The castle doesn't just stand, it responds. When the Battle of Hogwarts begins, walls awaken, statues move, and corridors seal themselves against invaders. The magic isn't random, it's instinct. Only those who are worthy can find the door they seek, the room of requirement teaches. That room is no spell, it's a heartbeat. It listens, understands, and creates what a person needs most. When Harry hides the Half-Blood Prince's book there, the room feels his guilt. When Neville later fills it with rebels, it senses courage. The castle remembers emotion, not command. Maybe that's why the Sorting Hat sings of unity every year. Though different houses may seem apart, together they stand, hand and heart. It's not just a song, it's the voice of Hogwarts itself, urging its children to remain one. Perhaps the hat doesn't choose at all. It translates the will of the school, a living spirit born from centuries of learning, love, and loss. That would explain why Hogwarts always protects its own, even from beyond the grave. It's not a building, it's a guardian, a living, breathing witness to every triumph and tragedy that magic has ever known. Number 9. Gifts without power. The Deathly Hallows were never meant to be trophies. They were lessons disguised as power. Voldemort, the most feared wizard of his age, held the Elder Wand, yet it never truly obeyed him. He took it by force, never realizing it cannot be mastered through domination. The wand chooses the wizard, Ollivander once said, and the Elder Wand chose Harry not because he was powerful, but because he understood sacrifice. When Voldemort raised it in the final battle, it turned against him. The wand recognized its true master, the boy who never wanted to rule anyone. Each Hallow carries the same message. The Resurrection Stone answers only to one who can let go of grief. When Harry turns it over in his hand, he doesn't summon ghosts for comfort. He calls them to walk beside him toward death. "Stay close to me," he whispers, and they do. Not as illusions, but as strength. That moment reveals what the stone truly is, not a way to cling to the dead, but a way to face mortality without fear. It gives peace, not control. And then there's the invisibility cloak, the most misunderstood of the three. Unlike the others, it demands nothing. It simply protects, humbly and quietly. Harry uses it not to deceive, but to survive, to help. That is why it remains loyal to him until the end. Together, the Hallows form a riddle, one that only Harry solves. To be the master of death is not to defeat it, but to accept it. In choosing compassion over conquest, he becomes what Voldemort could never be, a wizard powerful enough to live without the need to conquer. Number 10, the magic of memory. In the wizarding world, memories are alive. They breathe, shimmer, and whisper when touched. When Dumbledore pours a silvery thread into the pensieve, it isn't just a vision, it's a living fragment of time. Memories are not just pictures, he tells Harry. They are emotions, sounds, smells, a whole world. And he's right. When Harry dives into Snape's memory, he doesn't watch it, he enters it. He feels the cold wind, hears the young Lily laugh, senses the pain that shaped a man. These are not echoes. They are realities preserved, pieces of emotion captured forever. That's why the pensieve feels more like a portal than a bowl. Each memory carries energy, the same kind of magic that fuels a Patronus or breaks a curse. If spells are born from feeling, then memories are their oldest form. Dumbledore doesn't collect them to reminisce. he collects them to understand, to study the truth not from books but from the living essence of the past. It's why he shows Harry the memory of Tom Riddle asking about Horcruxes, not as a warning, but as a revelation. This memory, he says quietly, is perhaps the most important of all. In that shimmering moment, the past becomes a weapon against the future. And maybe that's the secret. Magic in Harry Potter has always been tied to emotion, to love, fear, hope, and grief. A memory is all of that, frozen in time. When Harry looks into the pensieve, he's not escaping the present, he's learning from it. The past, in this world, isn't gone. It waits. It watches. And for those brave enough to relive it, like Harry and Dumbledore, it offers the most powerful kind of magic there is, the ability to see the truth and change what comes next. Number 11, the gift of blood. It all began with Lily Potter's sacrifice. Everyone remembers her love as the reason Harry survived, but love alone doesn't explain the ancient magic Dumbledore described. It wasn't just affection that saved the boy. It was blood. When Lily died, she sealed an ancient bond between sisters. Her blood still flowed in Petunia Dursley's veins, and through that connection, a protection older than Hogwarts itself was born. "Your aunt knows that her home provides you with shelter," Dumbledore told Harry. "While you can still call that place home, you are safe from Lord Voldemort." Lily's death didn't just stop a curse. It built a sanctuary, invisible and unbreakable. Think of what that means. The house on Privet Drive wasn't just an ordinary home. Its walls held a sacred barrier, one that Voldemort himself couldn't touch. Every insult, every locked cupboard, every cruel word from the Dursleys, all of it happened under a roof that hummed with Lily's protection. Petunia might have despised magic, but her blood carried it nonetheless. It was as if Lily's love forced its way into her sister's life, giving Petunia a role she neither wanted nor understood. She didn't have to believe in the charm. The magic believed in her. Years later, that same magic came full circle. When Voldemort rose again, he made a horrifying choice to use Harry's blood to restore his body. He said, "His mother's protection lives in his blood still. It shall now reside in my veins." It was a desperate act of control, an attempt to twist love's protection into power. But he misunderstood the spell. By taking Harry's blood, Voldemort unknowingly anchored Lily's protection to himself. Her sacrifice bound their fates even tighter. As long as Harry lived, a fragment of that magic pulsed inside the Dark Lord, denying death its final claim. So Harry survived twice, once through Lily's selfless act, and again through Voldemort's arrogance. The same blood that gave him life became the weapon that confused death itself. It's not just a story of love conquering darkness. It's the story of blood that remembers, of family that endures even when torn apart. Lily didn't just die for her son. She rewrote the oldest rule of magic, that death always wins. Number 12, the secret of family names. In the world of Harry Potter, even a name carries a spell of its own. J.K. Rowling never chose them at random. Each one whispers something about destiny, like a hidden prophecy disguised as a surname. Take Severus Snape. His name sounds sharp, hissing with danger. Snape echoes to snipe, to mock, to wound with words. And that's exactly what he does. His tongue is a weapon, his tone a shield. There's also snake hidden in it, the eternal symbol of Slytherin. Behind every sneer, behind the black robes, you can almost hear the serpent's hiss. Then there's Albus Dumbledore, an Old English word for bumblebee. A strange choice until you picture him walking through the corridors of Hogwarts, humming softly under his breath. "Music," he once said, "a magic beyond all we do here." Like a bee, he flits from student to student, spreading wisdom and sweetness, though his sting, when it comes, is sharp. The name fits perfectly. Dumbledore buzzes with quiet energy, a man who collects secrets like nectar and turns them into honeyed truths. The Malfoys, on the other hand, are born from darker roots. Malfoy in French means bad faith. It's the essence of deception. The family wears grace like armor and hides venom beneath silk. Lucius, Narcissa, Draco, their elegance is their mask. When Dumbledore says to Draco, "You are not a killer," it's as if he's trying to break the curse written into their very name. Yet even in that darkness, Rowling leaves room for change. A Malfoy may be doomed to deceit, but he can still choose mercy. And finally Potter, the one who shapes clay, a craftsman, a creator, the name of a boy who moulds his own fate from the rough earth of tragedy. The Boy Who Lived is more than a title, it's a work of art made by his own hands. Through loss, pain, and love, Harry becomes both the clay and the potter, the maker of his own story. Rowling's names aren't labels, they're ancient symbols, quietly shaping the world of magic long before a single spell is cast. Number 13, The Last Enemy. On the white stone of the Godric's Hollow graveyard, beneath the names of James and Lily Potter, stands a line that few truly understand. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. To most, it reads like a promise of resurrection or a symbol of hope. But for those who trace Harry Potter's journey to its deepest meaning, it is the hidden axis around which the entire saga turns. The war between Harry and Voldemort is not truly a battle between good and evil. It is a struggle between acceptance and denial, between the courage to face death and the desperate attempt to outrun it. When Harry enters the Forbidden Forest in the Deathly Hallows, he is not walking toward a duel. He is walking toward understanding. Every step he takes through the darkness is a step away from fear. He does not raise his wand to strike. He goes unarmed, unshielded, unafraid. "I am about to die," he thinks with calm certainty. In that moment he achieves what no wizard, no hero or villain has ever done before him. He destroys the last enemy, not by casting a spell, but by embracing the inevitable. Death, which haunted every generation of witches and wizards, loses its grip on him precisely because he no longer resists it. Voldemort, whose birth name was Tom Riddle, spends his life running from that same truth. His entire empire of darkness is built upon the illusion that death can be controlled. The Horcruxes, pieces of his soul locked in objects, are not symbols of power but monuments to terror. "I, who have gone further than anybody along the path that leads to immortality," he once boasts. Yet every Horcrux weakens him, fragmenting his humanity. In trying to escape death, he becomes a living corpse, devoid of love, compassion, and soul. When Harry faces him in the forest, Voldemort kills only the part of Harry that connects him to this broken being. What dies in Harry that night is not his life, it is his fear. Throughout the series, Rowling builds death into the heart of every character's motivation. Dumbledore fears the consequences of his own youthful ambition after Ariana's death and spends his remaining years preparing Harry for sacrifice. Severus Snape lives haunted by Lily's grave, his entire existence shaped by grief and guilt. Even Draco Malfoy, though not a villain by choice, is driven by fear. Fear of his father, fear of failure, fear of what will happen if he disobeys. "You don't know what it's like," Draco whispers once in Half-Blood Prince, trembling under the weight of orders he cannot fulfill. Every action of darkness in this universe sprouts from the same poisoned seed, the inability to face death with peace. Harry's victory begins the moment he stops fighting it. When he retrieves the resurrection stone from the snitch and walks into the forest, he does not call on his parents' ghosts to protect him. He calls them to walk beside him. He did not seek to call them back for long, the book says, only long enough to feel that he was not alone. That choice, to face the inevitable surrounded by love rather than hatred, defines him. Unlike Voldemort, who isolates himself from humanity to avoid loss, Harry connects to it completely, even in the moment of dying. The quote on his parents' grave is not about triumph over death through magic, it is about triumph through surrender. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death, comes from the Bible, from Corinthians 15:26, a passage about resurrection and the victory of the soul over mortality. Rowling's choice of this inscription is deliberate. It transforms the graveyard into a silent prophecy. The Potter's resting place becomes the symbol of a truth their son would one day embody, that the end is not defeat, and to accept it is to be free. When Harry awakens in the white mist of King's Cross after Voldemort strikes him down, he speaks with Dumbledore. The old wizard tells him, "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all those who live without love." This is the culmination of the entire message. Death, for Rowling, is not the tragedy. It is life without love that is the true curse. Voldemort's immortality is hollow precisely because it lacks love. In contrast, Harry's mortal life is made sacred by his willingness to give it for others. The last enemy dies not because Harry survives, but because he loves without condition, even to the point of death. The entire saga subtly builds toward this paradoxical resolution. In the Sorcerer's Stone, the Mirror of Erised reveals the danger of longing for what is lost. Dumbledore warns Harry, "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live." From that moment, the story becomes a slow education in mortality. Cedric Diggory's body returning from the maze in Goblet of Fire is the first raw lesson. Sirius Black's fall through the veil in Order of the Phoenix is the second. Dumbledore's death atop the Astronomy Tower is the third. By the time he reaches the forest, Harry has already been stripped of everything but his choice. Rowling does not glorify death, but she redefines it. For Harry, it becomes an act of love, not surrender. The boy who once feared the loss of every person he cared about now understands that love transcends death. This is why, when Voldemort's killing curse rebounds upon him, Harry survives, not because of Wandlore, but because his acceptance has disarmed the spell's moral foundation. Magic in this world responds not merely to words, but to intention, and Harry's intention is pure. Voldemort's curse, born of fear and hatred, cannot coexist with a soul that has chosen peace. Number 14, the hidden side of the prophecy. When Sybil Trelawney uttered her trembling prophecy in that dusty room above the Hog's Head, the fate of two boys began to weave itself into a single thread. The prophecy, recorded by Dumbledore and overheard by Severus Snape, spoke of a child born as the 7th month dies, who would have the power the Dark Lord knows not. Everyone assumed it meant Harry Potter, the child who survived the killing curse. But few ever stopped to look closer, to read between the cracks of those words, where another name was waiting: Neville Longbottom. He was born on July 30th, just one day before Harry, to parents who, like the Potters, had defied Voldemort 3 times. The prophecy could have belonged to him. The choice was never about destiny alone, it was about who Voldemort feared more. And in choosing Harry, Voldemort shaped both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Neville was never the boy who lived. He didn't grow up with whispers of greatness or the burden of expectation. Instead, he grew up in the shadow of silence, raised by his strict grandmother after Bellatrix Lestrange tortured his parents into madness. Harry's scar marked him as chosen, Neville's life marked him as forgotten. But the universe has a strange balance. The prophecy did not simply crown a savior, it set in motion a pattern of duality. Two boys born of courage, two hearts touched by loss, both bound to the downfall of the same evil. When Dumbledore explained the prophecy to Harry in Order of the Phoenix, he said something that opened the door to this invisible side of fate. It means that it might have been Neville. Harry listened in shock, but Dumbledore continued. Voldemort himself marked you as his equal. He chose you, and that made you the chosen one. It was not the words of Trelawney alone that sealed destiny. It was Voldemort's fear. In trying to prevent the prophecy, he created it. But if the Dark Lord had chosen Neville, everything would have been reversed. The lightning scar might have burned on Neville's forehead. The world would have called him the Chosen One. And yet deep down, both boys carried the same seed of defiance. Neville's story is not one of grandeur, but of quiet heroism. He was clumsy, often forgetful, laughed at by his peers, and underestimated by teachers. Yet he had something that could not be measured: resilience. Every humiliation at Hogwarts, every failure in class, every cutting remark from Professor Snape only hardened the courage within him. While Harry faced Voldemort directly, Neville was fighting his own war, the war of self-belief. J.K. Rowling once said in an interview that Neville represents the idea that it is our choices that show what we truly are. His choice to keep fighting, even when he had no prophecy to guide him, no fame to protect him, and no mentor constantly by his side, was an act of quiet defiance, as powerful as Harry's. When we look at the prophecy's words, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, it becomes almost poetic how it applied to both. Harry faced Voldemort in the realm of souls, dying and returning, breaking the bond of the Horcrux within him. Neville, on the other hand, brought the final blow in the realm of the living. In the chaos of the Battle of Hogwarts, when Voldemort's followers were closing in and hope seemed almost lost, it was Neville who stepped forward, holding the sword of Gryffindor. He stood alone, surrounded by Death Eaters, his robes torn, his voice trembling but firm. And then he struck, severing the head of Nagini, the last Horcrux. The snake's death shattered Voldemort's last tether to immortality. It is fascinating to realize that while Harry symbolically destroyed evil through sacrifice, Neville physically destroyed it through action. Together their deeds completed the prophecy. "Neither can live while the other survives," the prophecy said. But what if it also meant that evil itself could not survive while both the pure-hearted remained alive? In that final moment, when Nagini fell and Voldemort's power crumbled, the invisible side of the prophecy revealed itself. It was not only Harry who had the power the Dark Lord knew not: love, courage, and self-sacrifice. It was Neville as well. Throughout the saga, Rowling leaves subtle threads pointing toward this dual interpretation. When the Sorting Hat placed Neville in Gryffindor, it wasn't by mistake. The hat saw something buried deep, a bravery so profound that it would one day stand before death itself. In the Philosopher's Stone, Dumbledore awarded Neville 10 points for standing up to his friends, saying, "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends." It seemed small then, but that moment was a seed. The same courage that made an 11-year-old boy confront Harry, Ron and Hermione would one day make a man stand against Voldemort himself. Neville's wand was not his own for most of the series. He inherited it after his father's. In Deathly Hallows, after it was broken, he finally earned a wand of his own. That change was symbolic. It marked the moment he became his own person, no longer living in the shadow of his parents' tragedy or the expectations of others. It was a quiet transformation, mirroring Harry's emotional journey toward accepting his own mortality. And when Harry entered the Forbidden Forest to face death, Neville remained behind to face life, to lead, to resist, and to inspire. Number 15. The House That Wasn't Chosen. When the Sorting Hat touched Harry Potter's head, it didn't hesitate to probe into the boy's thoughts. It whispered words that would echo through his life. "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness. No doubt about that." The young boy trembled, his heart filled with a fear he couldn't fully explain. "Not Slytherin," he pleaded. And with those 4 words, destiny bent in another direction. But what if he hadn't said them? What if Harry had stayed silent? The hat had seen it. Ambition, resourcefulness, leadership. Every spark of a Slytherin burned inside him. The question is not what would have happened if he had joined Slytherin, but whether that was, in fact, where he truly belonged. The qualities that define a Slytherin, cunning, determination, adaptability, appear in Harry from the very beginning. He lies to his uncle without hesitation, sneaks around the castle under an invisibility cloak, and outsmarts opponents through quick thinking rather than brute strength. These are not the traits of a reckless Gryffindor rushing into danger out of sheer courage. They are the actions of a strategist. Even his friendship with Ron and Hermione often relies on his ability to persuade and manipulate situations to achieve his goals. When he decides to steal the Philosopher's Stone before Snape, or rather Quirrell, can reach it, he does not act from blind bravery. He acts from foresight and careful planning, hallmarks of Slytherin cunning. Throughout the series, Harry's instincts echo that serpent's voice that almost called him home. In Chamber of Secrets, when he speaks Parseltongue before the dueling club, the entire hall freezes. The truth is laid bare. The boy who lived carries a language of snakes in his blood. Even Ron recoils, whispering that it's the mark of a dark wizard. But what if that scene had unfolded differently? What if the Slytherins had cheered him instead of shrinking back? Harry might have found acceptance there, understanding rather than judgment. The hat had not been mistaken. It had seen what no one else wanted to see. Inside this boy was power, ambition, and the shadow of greatness. If Harry had entered Slytherin, he would have found not a den of villains, but a crucible for self-mastery. Severus Snape, another misunderstood serpent, might have taken him under his wing earlier. Imagine Snape watching the boy he vowed to protect grow among his own house, recognizing familiar defiance in his eyes. Their bond could have formed not through tragedy, but through shared secrecy. In that world, Draco Malfoy would not have been an enemy. He might have become a rival, perhaps even a friend. Both were sons, burdened by legacies they didn't choose, seeking identity in shadows cast by their fathers. Their duel in Chamber of Secrets could have been replaced by alliance, 2 cunning minds joining forces against the manipulations of the adults around them. Draco, on the other hand, is often portrayed as Harry's opposite. But look closer, and he seems more Gryffindor than anyone dares to admit. In Half-Blood Prince, When Draco stands trembling in the astronomy tower, wand aimed at Dumbledore, he is paralyzed not by fear, but by conscience. He refuses to kill. That is not cowardice. That is moral courage, the same type of courage that defines the scar on Harry's forehead. Draco's loyalty to his family mirrors Harry's loyalty to his friends. Both act from love, twisted or pure, and both pay for it. If the hat had seen only bravery in Draco's heart, perhaps it might have shouted Gryffindor just as easily. It becomes clear that the Sorting Hat's judgment is not prophecy but invitation. It looks into the soul and asks one simple question: who do you wish to become? Harry's whisper, "Not Slytherin," was a declaration of identity more powerful than any spell. It wasn't fear of darkness. It was the desire to belong somewhere safe, but belonging and destiny are not the same. As Dumbledore later told him, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." The House of Lions did not make Harry brave. It merely gave him a mirror to recognize courage in himself. There are moments throughout the series when Slytherin traits save him more than Gryffindor valor. When he hides under the cloak to spy on Draco in Half-Blood Prince, when he tricks Umbridge into entering the Forbidden Forest, or when he manipulates the Ministry's rules to sneak into a courtroom. These are not acts of noble daring. They are calculated, deceptive, and strategic. He wins, not by charging forward, but by thinking sideways. Slytherin House would have taught him to refine these instincts rather than conceal them. Perhaps he would have learned to control his temper earlier, to see beyond the surface of his enemies, to understand that light and dark often share the same face. What's more, Harry's path through the story often crosses the Slytherin road, not as an intruder, but as a traveller who knows its terrain. He opens the Chamber of Secrets, masters the Elder Wand, once owned by a Slytherin descendant, and learns occlumency, a discipline of secrecy and control taught by Snape. These are Slytherin lessons, not Gryffindor ones. Even his final act, walking into the Forbidden Forest to die, carries a Slytherin undertone. It's not only bravery, but cold acceptance of necessity. He does not fight fate with fire, he outwits it through sacrifice. Number 16, Ghosts that cannot rest. In the dim corridors of Hogwarts, the ghosts seem like familiar companions, part of the castle's heartbeat. They glide through walls, whisper ancient tales, and occasionally offer cryptic advice to those who dare to listen. Yet beneath their translucent calm lies a chilling truth. They are not merely echoes of the past, but prisoners of their own fear. Nearly headless Nick once admitted to Harry, "I was afraid of death. I chose to remain behind." His words, light as air, carried the unbearable weight of eternal regret. For in the wizarding world, to become a ghost is not an act of courage, but of surrender, a refusal to face the unknown. Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington's story is both sad and telling. Beheaded in 1492, his execution went wrong. His head was left hanging by a shred of skin and sinew, denying him both dignity in death and peace in eternity. In the centuries that followed, he remained bound to Hogwarts, wandering through feasts and funerals, smiling with brittle cheer. Students saw only his charm, but his eyes betrayed something else, the endless yearning of someone who could not move on. When Harry asked if death hurt, Nick's reply was hauntingly simple: "It's nothing like being alive." The castle had given him shelter, but not freedom. He was not living, and yet not dead. This fragile line between existence and oblivion defines all Hogwarts ghosts. The Bloody Baron, Slytherin's spectral guardian, carries stains of blood that no magic can cleanse. Once a man consumed by love and jealousy, he killed Helena Ravenclaw, the Grey Lady, and then himself, condemned to linger beside the woman he wronged. She wanders still, silent and sorrowful, her presence a whisper of unspoken forgiveness that will never come. Their story mirrors the tragedy of human emotion turned eternal. They are bound not by chains but by remorse. Helena Ravenclaw's fate reveals the cruel irony of being a ghost in the wizarding world. She fled her mother, Rowena, seeking freedom and knowledge, only to be hunted down by the Baron. Her death and his locked them in a cycle of guilt and grief that centuries cannot erase. She remains the keeper of her mother's diadem, a relic of wisdom turned curse. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Ritus, when Harry speaks to her, she trembles as she recalls her choice. I sought to make myself cleverer, more important than my mother. I ran away with her diadem. It is not just the diadem that haunts her, but the echo of a mistake she can never undo. The fat friar of Hufflepuff, kind and endlessly forgiving, seems to bear his afterlife more gently. Yet, even he is trapped in memory. Executed by the Church for pulling rabbits out of the communion cup, his spirit lingers in the castle where tolerance reigns. His laughter, once warm, is now thin and weightless, unable to fill the silence of the great hall. The castle gives him purpose. A house ghost, a comfort to the living. But that purpose is a lie. He remains because he too could not let go. The irony is that the friar, the very symbol of faith and acceptance, embodies the fear of divine judgment. The Grey Lady, the Bloody Baron, the friar, and Sir Nicholas, they are not merely lost souls, but fragments of Hogwarts itself. The castle remembers them, breathes them, and sustains their image. Every corridor holds an imprint of emotion, every room a flicker of memory. Perhaps it is not their souls that roam these halls, but the castle's memory of them, replaying their stories like old records that never stop spinning. When Dumbledore once told Harry that help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it, he might not have meant only the living. The theory that Hogwarts itself keeps its ghosts alive gives new meaning to the castle's magic. Built by 4 founders who imbued it with powerful enchantments, the school seems almost sentient. The staircases move, the portraits speak, and the walls whisper. It is as though Hogwarts refuses to forget. When the founders created the castle, they filled it with protective spells, perhaps unintentionally weaving a net strong enough to catch lingering echoes of the dead. The ghosts then could be not souls at all, but reflections held in place by the will of the school, memories too stubborn to fade. If this is true, then the ghost's pain is not self-inflicted, but a consequence of the castle's memory. They are remnants of human feeling preserved in stone and spell. Nearly headless Nick's sorrow, the Baron's guilt, the Grey Lady's silence. These are not just personal tragedies, but emotional imprints feeding Hogwarts' sentience. Every student who passes through those corridors learns, unknowingly, from the shadows of the past. The ghosts teach not through lessons, but through their inability to change. They remind the living of what happens when one cannot let go. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry first encounters the ghosts during the welcome feast, he feels both awe and unease. They are so casual in their presence, laughing, conversing, even arguing, yet their translucence betrays their unreality. The living eat, drink, and dream of the future. The dead repeat the same gestures forever. This eternal stasis is perhaps the greatest curse of all. To exist without growth, to remember without release, that is the price of fear. One could wonder why, in a world of such powerful magic, there is no spell to set them free. Wizards can bring back shades of the dead through the resurrection stone, yet ghosts remain bound. Dumbledore once explained, "The truly wise do not seek to reverse death." Perhaps the ghosts are warnings to those who would try. They are the visible evidence that to resist death is to lose oneself, to trade eternity for imitation. Hogwarts itself seems to mourn through them. Its walls echo with history, its stones resonate with emotion. During the Battle of Hogwarts, when the castle came alive to defend its students, even the ghosts stood ready, yet they could not fight, they could only watch. The living bled and died, the dead could only witness. For all their presence, they are powerless, reminders that courage belongs to those who still have something to lose. Consider moaning Myrtle, whose restless sobs echo through the girls' bathroom. Killed by the basilisk on Tom Riddle's orders, she has been reliving her humiliation and loneliness ever since. She is not evil nor vengeful, only trapped, emotionally and spiritually. Her haunting is not about scaring others, but about clinging to attention she never received in life. She once told Harry, "I was distraught when I died and I came back. I thought I'd never be alone again." Yet the irony is cruel. She is lonelier than ever, confined to plumbing and pity. The castle sustains her image, amplifying her sorrow, until it becomes part of its very soundscape. If the ghosts are the castle's memories, then Hogwarts is not merely a school. It is a repository of emotion. The laughter of students, the cries of the fallen, the regrets of the dead, all are woven into its enchantments. The ghosts do not choose to haunt, they are chosen. The castle holds them as symbols of continuity, fragments of an emotional archive that refuses oblivion. Every time a new generation of students crosses its threshold, it inherits not only the founder's wisdom, but the pain of those who could not leave. In this sense, Hogwarts is both sanctuary and tomb. It preserves, protects, and remembers, but it also traps. The ghosts are testimonies to that duality. They keep the past alive, yet they themselves are lifeless. The living seek their advice, unaware that these shimmering figures are relics of unfinished stories. Hogwarts may appear kind and nurturing, but in truth it never lets go of those it has claimed. The castle's love is possessive, like a spell of remembrance too powerful to undo. And so, the next time one imagines nearly headless Nick floating through a Halloween feast, smiling among the flickering candles, it is worth remembering what lies behind that smile. It is not celebration, but endurance. Hogwarts keeps him here because the castle itself is afraid to forget, afraid to lose its history. The ghosts are not intruders, but the castle's way of holding on. They are, in the truest sense, the breath of its memory, repeating endlessly in the echoing halls of a school that has never truly learned to let go. Number 17, Horcruxes as mirrors of the soul. The diary was the first mirror of Tom Riddle's soul, and it revealed more than any confession could. Created during his teenage years, it was both a tool and a testament to his vanity. The diary wasn't merely meant to preserve a piece of his life. It was meant to preserve his genius, to ensure that even decades later, someone would read his words and admire him. When Ginny Weasley poured her fears into its pages, the book responded not with comfort, but with manipulation. It devoured her, as Tom's ego devoured everything around him. This Horcrux was the purest reflection of his narcissism. As Dumbledore once observed, "You must be the only student Hogwarts ever had who found a way to turn homework into immortality." Tom Riddle wanted the world to remember his brilliance, not his humanity. And so he trapped his own reflection in ink and shadow. The Hufflepuff cup revealed another face of his fractured soul. Greed disguised as legacy. Helga Hufflepuff had once represented fairness and generosity, but Voldemort desecrated her relic by making it a trophy of conquest. To him, possessing the cup meant possessing history itself. He stole it from Hepzibah Smith not because he needed it, but because he could not bear the thought that something rare and valuable belonged to another. It wasn't enough to live forever. He had to own everything that symbolized greatness. The cup was small, golden, and deceptively innocent, a perfect disguise for the hunger inside him. When Hermione later destroyed it with a basilisk fang, the scream that echoed from its molten gold was the wail of a soul choking on its own excess. The diadem of Ravenclaw exposed another layer of his character, the pursuit of knowledge without the wisdom to use it. Rowena Ravenclaw had once valued wit and intellect, yet her diadem became a mockery of both. Tom Riddle found it hidden in Albania, an ancient relic meant to enhance the wisdom of the wearer. But he didn't seek wisdom, he sought superiority. By corrupting the diadem, he declared that intelligence meant nothing without domination. "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure," read the diadem's inscription, but to Riddle, wit was only a weapon. He never sought understanding, he sought control. When the Room of Requirement burned during the Battle of Hogwarts, and the diadem melted among the flames, it was as if the false intellect he worshipped had been consumed by truth itself. The Slytherin locket embodied envy and suspicion, the emotions that had haunted him from childhood. It was the heirloom of Salazar Slytherin, a founder who, like Tom, distrusted those who didn't share his bloodline. Voldemort didn't just admire Slytherin, he envied him. The locket became a channel for that envy, a whispering parasite that spread doubt even among the pure of heart. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione carried it, they felt the darkness gnaw at them. It magnified their insecurities, Ron's jealousy, Harry's guilt, Hermione's fear. The locket didn't create evil, it revealed what was already inside. That was its cruelty and its truth. When Ron finally destroyed it, he wasn't just shattering metal, he was breaking through the mirror of Voldemort's own distrust, the same distrust that had left the Dark Lord forever alone. Then came Nagini, no longer a symbol, but a manifestation. She wasn't an object turned Horcrux, she was a living creature enslaved by his will. The serpent represented the animal soul, the primal hunger that Voldemort could never transcend. His ability to speak Parseltongue tied him to her. They were bound not by intellect, but by instinct. Nagini's existence proved that his humanity was gone. He had merged with the creature he once commanded, relying on her venom, her eyes, her obedience. It was telling that when Neville Longbottom beheaded Nagini, it was as if the last vestige of Voldemort's soul, the last echo of his animal will to survive, had been silenced. He had divided his essence so deeply that even his instincts turned against him. Yet there was one more Horcrux, the accidental one. Harry Potter carried a fragment of the same soul, yet he remained uncorrupted. The difference lay not in the fragment itself, but in the host that carried it. Where Voldemort's Horcruxes were born of fear and control, Harry's existence was born of sacrifice. His mother's love, that ancient, invincible magic, created a protection no dark ritual could match. As Dumbledore explained, your mother's sacrifice made the bond between you and Voldemort something unique. He gave you part of his soul, without understanding that he was giving you power he could never possess. That power was love, and it turned what should have been a curse into a blessing. Inside Harry, the fragment of Voldemort's soul did not thrive, it slept. It had no nourishment, no hatred to feed upon. Harry's pain, his loneliness, his grief, all were tempered by compassion. He grew up unloved, yet he chose to love. That single choice marked the chasm between him and Voldemort. When he learned the truth, that he was a Horcrux, that he carried the enemy within, he didn't flee from it. He walked calmly into the Forbidden Forest, ready to die. The same act that made Voldemort immortal now demanded Harry's death for the world to be saved. Where Voldemort split his soul to avoid mortality, Harry accepted mortality to restore the soul. It was there, among the trees and shadows, that the mirror of their destinies became clear. Voldemort's Horcruxes were acts of mutilation. Harry's sacrifice was an act of healing. The killing curse struck him, yet he didn't die, because his heart, unlike Voldemort's, still held room for love. He was the seventh Horcrux, Dumbledore had said, but the difference was that he was unintentional. And perhaps that was the final irony. The purest form of redemption came from an accident of evil. The shard of darkness in Harry's heart became a light because it was surrounded by love strong enough to contain it. Every Horcrux, if looked at closely, reflected a part of Voldemort's journey toward nothingness. The diary, his self-worship, the cup, his greed, the diadem, his arrogance, the locket, his fear, the snake, his instinct. He had tried to become godlike, but with every act, he became less human. By the time he stood in the Great Hall for the final battle, surrounded by death and ruin, he was not a man, but a collection of ghosts, fragments of a soul that had forgotten what it meant to live. Harry, on the other hand, carried within him something Voldemort never could, a complete heart. Even when that heart was burdened by darkness, it remained whole. The moment after Harry's resurrection, when he faced Voldemort one last time, the symbolism was almost cruel. Voldemort stood surrounded by his shattered Horcruxes, his mirrors broken, his reflections lost. Each one had been destroyed by love, loyalty, courage, or selflessness, virtues he had mocked all his life. Harry didn't need to strike him in hatred, he simply reflected the curse back. Avada Kedavra, Voldemort shouted, but it was his own spell, his own essence, that ended him. The serpent hissed one last time, the wand flew from his hand, and the soul that had once feared death found only oblivion. In that sense, the Horcruxes were never about magic. They were about truth. They told the story of how far a man could fall when he mistook power for meaning. The diary whispered lies, the cup demanded ownership, the diadem mocked wisdom, the locket bred distrust, and the serpent devoured life. Each time Voldemort killed to preserve himself, he was only carving away another layer of his being. Harry, who never sought immortality, achieved it in the only way that mattered, through memory, through love, through sacrifice remembered. If one were to imagine the soul as a mirror, Voldemort's would be shattered into jagged pieces, each reflecting only fear. Harry's, though wounded, would remain whole, reflecting light even through cracks. When he chose to walk into death unarmed, he repaired what Voldemort had destroyed, not just his own fate, but the moral balance of the world they shared. "Does it hurt?" he had once asked Dumbledore's shade. "Dying? Not at all," came the answer, quicker and easier than falling asleep. For Voldemort, death had been the ultimate terror. For Harry, it became peace. And so the same magic, the same broken fragment, became two mirrors showing two truths. In Voldemort's heart, it bred endless night. In Harry's, it met dawn. That is why, when the dust settled and the Elder Wand fell silent, the world didn't just lose a tyrant, it regained its reflection. Each Horcrux that had held darkness was destroyed by a virtue that Voldemort had scorned. The diary by loyalty, the cup by courage, the diadem by repentance, the locket by friendship, the snake by defiance, and the final shard, the one within Harry, by love. In the end, the tale of the Horcruxes was never a story of dark magic, but of human nature. It revealed that the soul is not meant to be divided, it is meant to be tested. Voldemort tried to conquer death and became a prisoner of it. Harry accepted death and became its master. One man tore his soul to pieces, the other proved that even a broken soul can shine if there is love within. The Horcruxes were Voldemort's mirrors, but Harry, the accidental Horcrux, was their answer. Where Voldemort saw power, Harry saw sacrifice. And in that reflection, the truth of both men was revealed. Number 18, Thestrals, Guardians of the Boundary. The first time Harry Potter saw the Thestrals, he thought he had lost his mind. He stood on the path to the carriages after the Triwizard Tournament, expecting to see the horseless vehicles that had always carried students to the castle. But this time, skeletal black creatures stood in their place, their leathery wings glinting faintly in the twilight. They were not in any of the textbooks, not mentioned in any of Hagrid's lessons, and yet they were there, real, breathing, and entirely invisible to most of his friends. What changed? Only one thing. Harry had seen death, not just seen it, but understood it. Cedric Diggory's lifeless body on the grass of the graveyard was not something the boy could rationalize away. For the first time, Harry grasped that life could be gone in a heartbeat, and that realization tore through the last remains of his childhood. It is said that Thestrals can only be seen by those who have witnessed death. But that statement, as simple as it sounds, hides a much deeper truth. Many in the wizarding world have seen death. Parents who lost children, aurors who fought in battles, healers in St. Mungo's, but not all of them can see Thestrals. Luna Lovegood could see them because she had seen her mother die and had accepted that painful truth with a strange calm. Harry, on the other hand, had seen his mother's murder as a baby, yet he did not see Thestrals until his 5th year. What changed was not his eyesight, but his understanding. Between seeing and accepting lies a chasm. That few cross without loss. Thestrals are not just creatures of death, they are guardians of comprehension. Their presence marks the thin border between life and what lies beyond, a boundary invisible to the unready. When Harry first looked into those clouded, wise eyes, he felt neither fear nor revulsion, but an eerie recognition. As Luna once said, then, so they're not frightening, just misunderstood. To see them is to acknowledge that death is not a monster, but a fact, a quiet certainty that gives meaning to life. They appear only when a person is ready to see the world without illusions, when grief has settled into acceptance rather than denial. It is no coincidence that J.K. Rowling placed Thestrals at the beginning and end of so many journeys. They pull the carriages that carry students to Hogwarts, the castle that itself sits between life and learning, innocence and danger. They also appear when Harry and his friends set out to save Sirius Black, guiding them from the world of safety into the chaos of the unknown. These creatures always stand at thresholds. They are, in essence, the guardians of the borderlands, between youth and maturity, between ignorance and wisdom, between the living and the departed. The idea of seeing death in the wizarding world is not merely about witnessing the end of a heartbeat. It is about internal transformation. When Harry saw Cedric die, he was forced to confront mortality not as a rumor or a story, but as a personal truth. He was there, and then he wasn't, Harry told himself later. The world did not stop, the stars did not blink out, and yet something irreversible had happened. The shock of that realization matured him more than any lesson at Hogwarts ever could. It stripped away the illusions of safety that had surrounded him. Only then could his eyes recognize the Thestrals for what they were, messengers of truth cloaked in darkness. In mythic symbolism, the Thestral mirrors the role of the psychopomp, a being that guides souls across the divide between life and death. In ancient Greek tales, it was Hermes or Charon who carried souls to the afterlife. In the wizarding world, the Thestral fulfills that same spiritual function, but in a gentler way. It does not drag souls into death, but walks beside those who have glimpsed it. When Harry rides a Thestral to the Ministry of Magic in Order of the Phoenix, he is not being taken to his doom, but to a place where his courage and grief merge into purpose. The journey on a Thestral is a crossing from innocence into understanding. One might recall how the first-year students at Hogwarts never question the carriages that move on their own. To them, the ride is magical but ordinary, a part of the wonder of their new world. But for older students like Harry and Luna, who have seen too much too soon, the sight of the Thestrals pulling those carriages is a quiet reminder that magic is not always beautiful. Sometimes it wears the face of loss. Yet, by the time they return home at the end of the year, those same creatures carry them back safely. The symbolism is profound. They bring you to learning and they return you to life, carrying both your curiosity and your sorrow. Rowling described them as reptilian horses with wings like bats, their black coats absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. In the hands of a lesser writer, they might have been symbols of fear. But in the Harry Potter universe, darkness is often the colour of truth. Thestrals defy the easy categories of good and evil. They feed on raw meat and dwell in shadowy forests, yet they are gentle, loyal, and intelligent. They can fly immense distances, finding paths no map records. They are paradoxes made flesh, death that carries life forward. When Harry reached out to touch one, he found the skin warm, the bones delicate. He could feel the warmth of life beneath the skeletal form, Rowling writes. That single sentence captures the entire paradox. Life and death are intertwined, not enemies, but partners in the same eternal dance. The Thestral is living death, proof that the end is not an absence but a continuation of being in another form. In that sense, they are guardians not of mortality, but of meaning. Neville Longbottom, who had seen his parents tortured into insanity, could not see Thestrals. This detail is crucial. It suggests that trauma alone is not enough. One must witness the finality of death itself and come to terms with it. Neville's suffering was ongoing. His parents still breathed, trapped between worlds. The Thestrals reveal themselves only when the mind has faced the absolute, when the curtain between existence and non-existence has been pulled back. That boundary, once seen, cannot be unseen. The creature's association with Luna Lovegood is equally telling. Luna, with her ethereal calm and acceptance of the unseen, treats the Thestrals as friends. She rides them without fear, speaks of them without shame, and, in doing so, teaches Harry one of the most vital lessons of his life. Her mother's death did not close Luna off. It opened her eyes. She became someone who could live among ghosts without losing her smile. For Luna, Thestrals were not symbols of tragedy, but of continuity. The world had not ended when her mother died, it had simply deepened. When Harry and Luna flew together on Thestrals to the Ministry, the moment became almost mythic. Beneath the night sky, high above the clouds, the two shared a silence that said more than words. The Thestral's wings beat in rhythm with the truth they both carried, that understanding death allows one to live without fear. In that sense, the flight was not only physical, it was spiritual. They were crossing into a place of confrontation and courage, guided by beings that existed on the very threshold of life and death. One could argue that Thestrals are the physical embodiment of acceptance. They appear when denial fades. They carry those who have faced mortality toward their destiny. Their invisibility is not a curse, but a mercy. Only when a person is ready to bear the truth do they become visible. To the unready, they remain unseen, protecting them from knowledge that might shatter their peace. In this way, Thestrals act as the universe's gentle filter, ensuring that wisdom comes only when the heart can handle it. It is striking that these creatures are the ones that pull the carriages to Hogwarts every year. The symbolism could not be more poignant. The journey to Hogwarts is the passage into learning, but it is also the first encounter with danger, failure, and, ultimately, mortality. The castle is where students discover both magic and loss. Every term begins and ends with a Thestral-guided journey, reminding us that to grow is to travel between the worlds of wonder and grief. The same beings that usher students into knowledge later carry them back home, forever changed. By the end of the series, when Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest to meet Voldemort, he no longer needs to see the Thestrals. He has become one of them in spirit, aware, accepting, unafraid. Death stands before him, but it is no longer the enemy. "Does it hurt?" he asks the echo of his parents. "Dying?" "Not at all," replies Sirius. "Quicker and easier than falling asleep." In that moment, the unseen border vanishes. The guardians of the threshold no longer need to appear, for Harry has already crossed it within his soul. The Thestrals, then, are not simply magical beasts hidden in the forest. They are the embodiment of enlightenment through loss. They remind us that only by accepting mortality do we begin to understand life. They are the silent witnesses to courage, the companions of those who have faced the truth. And perhaps that is why they wait at the gates of Hogwarts each year, invisible to most, patient and eternal. For when the time comes when a student learns what life truly costs, the Thestrals will be there, ready to carry them across the border, not into death, but into understanding. Number 19, The Curse of the Potters. It is curious how the Potter family, for all its fame and heroism, has always seemed to walk a narrow line between life and death, as if some unseen hand kept pulling them toward fate's sharpest edges. Generations before Harry was even born, their family name appeared again and again in moments when the wizarding world trembled. The story begins long before James and Lily's tragic deaths in Godric's Hollow. There was once a wizard named Henry Potter, known to his friends as Harry's great-grandfather Henry, who dared to challenge the authority of the ministry itself. In 1913, when the wizarding world faced social upheaval and growing secrecy laws, Henry publicly condemned the decision to withhold magical aid from Muggles during the First World War. His speech at the Wizengamot earned him both admiration and lasting enmity. It is said he was quietly removed from his post and erased from certain records. That act of defiance, scholars later whispered, marked the first sign of the Potter curse, an invisible mark on the family name that tied them to rebellion and sacrifice. Those who have studied magical lineages note that the Potters descend from a long-forgotten branch of the Peverell family. Yes, the same Peverells who were gifted the Deathly Hallows. Ignotus Peverell, the brother who possessed the Cloak of Invisibility, was said to have cheated death itself. The cloak passed down through his descendants, eventually finding its way into the hands of James Potter, and later his son. Yet, according to one obscure chronicle found in the restricted section of Hogwarts, the Peverell brothers made more than a simple exchange with death. The text, written in faded ink, warns, "Whosoever keeps what death has given shall keep also his gaze." Perhaps this is why every generation of Potters since has been watched, tested, and pulled toward moments where death stands close. James Potter's death fits this pattern too perfectly to ignore. He was a man of courage and confidence, yes, but the way he met his end, unarmed, facing Voldemort to buy Lily and Harry a few seconds, feels less like a coincidence and more like a continuation of a family story written long ago. The night in Godric's Hollow is remembered as a tragedy of love, yet it also reads like the fulfillment of an ancient bargain, another Potter standing before death, refusing to flee. As Dumbledore once told Harry, "You are protected, in fact, by your ability to love." But perhaps that love, that instinct to sacrifice, is not just noble, it is inherited, passed through blood, a binding legacy that demands each Potter must offer something to death, willingly or not. When Harry survived the killing curse as a baby, the world celebrated a miracle. But what if it was not divine protection or luck? What if it was the curse continuing its cycle? Every Potter, it seems, must encounter death and somehow rise from it. Henry through exile, James through sacrifice, Harry through survival. Each time the pattern deepens. It is no wonder Dumbledore watched Harry with both pride and sorrow, seeing in him not just hope, but repetition. "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living," he said. Those words sound almost like a warning. Perhaps Dumbledore knew that Harry's path was never free choice, but the inevitable pull of his bloodline. The connection between Harry and death itself is too vivid to be accidental. He speaks with the dead in ways few living wizards can. He conjures his parents, Sirius and Remus, in the forest, using the resurrection stone. Yet he does not tremble as others might. He looks into their faces calmly, even gratefully, and walks forward to die. In that moment, death does not take him. It bows. He greeted death as an old friend, the tale of the Peverell brothers says. And indeed, when Harry meets death in the Forbidden Forest, it feels less like defeat and more like recognition, as if the blood of Ignotus Peverell pulsing through his veins has finally fulfilled its ancient promise. This strange harmony with death extends beyond Harry's encounters with mortality. Magical creatures, too, seem drawn to him as if sensing the same aura. The Phoenix Forks, creature of endless rebirth, chose to save his life with tears and later provided the core of his wand's twin. Dementors, on the other hand, souls that feed on despair, are almost obsessed with him. He feels them before anyone else, sees them clearer, and yet he learns to drive them away not through hatred, but through memories of love. Between Phoenix and Dementor, between rebirth and oblivion, Harry stands at the midpoint. It is as though he is a magnet for the forces that define existence itself. Even the Thestrals recognize him. Most wizards find those skeletal winged horses terrifying, but Harry approaches them with quiet understanding. He sees them not as omens, but as companions. Only those who have seen death can perceive Thestrals, and Harry not only sees them, he bonds with them. It is a haunting echo of something ancient, the acceptance of death as both real and necessary. In a way, the Thestrals serve as living proof that Harry has stepped into a realm of understanding that most wizards avoid. He has crossed a boundary, and yet he continues to walk among the living. There is a curious theory among historians at the Department of Mysteries that connects the Potter's recurring tragedies to a ritual gone wrong. They claim an ancestor, possibly Linfred of Stinchcombe, the 12th century potioneer from whom the Potters descended, attempted to distill the elixir of life long before Nicolas Flamel's success. If that experiment indeed touched the veil between mortality and eternity, it might have cursed the entire line. Perhaps death itself demanded repayment. The Potters, known for courage and invention, might have been branded not as victims, but as participants in an unending test. Each must face the final boundary to keep balance in the world. Harry's strange luck and survival instincts reinforce this idea. Time and again, he narrowly escapes situations that should have killed him. The basilisk's venom in the Chamber of Secrets, Voldemort's curses, drowning beneath the lake during the Triwizard Tournament. There is always something, an unseen intervention, that preserves his life. Dumbledore once said, "You are the true master of death, because the true master does not seek to run away from it." Harry embodies that phrase not through ambition, but through surrender. He does not dominate death, he understands it. And that perhaps is the fulfillment of his family's curse, to become the living reflection of mortality itself. This also sheds light on why ghosts and echoes of the dead gravitate toward Harry. Nearly headless Nick confides in him more than any student. The Mirror of Erised reveals not greed or power to Harry, but the lost warmth of his family, an image of the boundary he can never cross. The Resurrection Stone, the Cloak, and the Elder Wand, all three Hallows, come under his control, if only for a moment. The wizarding world saw this as destiny, but it may be something older, the completion of a cycle started by Ignotus Peverell. For a brief time, the Potter line and death reached equilibrium, neither defeating the other. The mystery deepens when one considers the symbolic elements tied to Harry's story. The stag, his Patronus, represents purity, protection, and resurrection, its antlers branching like the tree of life. His mother's sacrifice, the ultimate act of love, mirrors ancient runes describing how love can bind the soul against death's reach. The scar on his forehead, shaped like lightning, resembles the rune Sowilo, an ancient symbol of the sun's rebirth after darkness. All these threads weave a single tapestry. The Potters are bound not by misfortune, but by cosmic design. Each generation stands as a bridge between endings and beginnings. The Potter curse might therefore not be a punishment at all, but a form of guardianship. The family's closeness to death may ensure that the balance of life remains intact. Perhaps that is why Harry's story ends not with conquest, but with quiet acceptance. He places the Elder Wand in Dumbledore's tomb, returning power to the earth, and leaves the stone in the forest, surrendering the temptation to control fate. By doing so, he closes the circle his ancestors opened centuries ago. In that moment, the supposed curse reveals itself as the deepest magic of all, the courage to let go. Even so, traces of that destiny remain. When Harry names his son Albus Severus Potter, he does not know how much of that ancient shadow still lingers. The boy grows up under the echo of prophecy, fear, and legacy. The name Potter still stirs whispers, still draws fate's attention. It is as though the curse, or the blessing, continues its quiet watch. The family's role in history is not over, it merely sleeps until the next generation must again face death and choose understanding over fear. The Potter's story, when viewed through this lens, is not simply one of bravery and tragedy. It is the story of humanity's oldest struggle, to accept mortality without surrendering to it. From Henry's defiance to James's sacrifice to Harry's rebirth, the bloodline follows a single rhythm. Each Potter is born to challenge the veil, to remind the wizarding world that death is not the enemy but a mirror. Theirs is a legacy both terrible and magnificent, where every heartbeat carries the echo of that ancient whisper, "Whosoever keeps what death has given shall keep also his gaze." And so the Potters walk forever beneath that gaze, neither cursed nor blessed, but chosen to stand where life and death meet, holding the balance for all. Number 20. The magic of time. In the dark corridors of Hogwarts, beneath the ticking of ancient clocks and the silent rotation of celestial spheres in the Tower Observatory, there lies a mystery that even the greatest wizards cannot fully comprehend: the nature of time itself. When Hermione Granger first revealed the time-turner in The Prisoner of Azkaban, it seemed like one of those marvels of the wizarding world that both dazzled and terrified, a delicate golden device, fragile yet powerful enough to bend the laws of reality. A few twists of its chain and one could walk back into the past. But what J.K. Rowling offered was not a story about rewriting history. It was a philosophical mirror reflecting how the magical world perceives fate, choice, and inevitability. The time-turner does not function as a tool of rebellion against destiny. Rather, it becomes proof of a deeper truth, that time in the wizarding world is circular, not linear. When Harry and Hermione return to save Sirius Black and Buckbeak, they are not changing what once was. They are fulfilling what has already happened. Harry does not alter his fate. He completes it. His earlier belief that he saw his father conjure the Patronus to save him turns into revelation when he realizes he himself was the one who cast it. "I knew I could do it this time because I'd already done it," he exclaims later. And this paradox unveils a startling rule of magic. Time cannot be broken, only understood. It is easy, perhaps too easy, to think of the time-turner as a narrative device for suspense. But behind it hides something far more unsettling. If all actions taken in the past were always meant to happen, then free will in the magical world becomes an illusion. Every spell, every death, every triumph may already be written into the great pattern of time. Dumbledore hints at this when he tells Harry, "You must not be seen." The warning is not just about avoiding paradox. It's about preserving the integrity of a story that has already told itself. To be seen would mean to interfere with what must happen, to fracture the perfection of a circle that has no beginning or end. The most haunting question that follows is this: if such a device exists, why was it not used to prevent tragedy? Why not turn back the clock to the night in Godric's Hollow to stop Voldemort's curse before it struck Lily and James? Why not intervene when the world needed saving most? The answer Dumbledore gives in silence is more powerful than any spell, because time in this world is not something to be controlled. It is sacred. It unfolds as it must. The death of Lily and James, the imprisonment of Sirius, even the rise of Voldemort, they are threads in a tapestry that no one, not even the greatest wizard alive, dares to unweave. This circular concept of time also explains the persistence of prophecy in Rowling's universe. When Sybil Trelawney foretells that neither can live while the other survives, she does not predict a possible future. She reveals one that has already been woven into existence. The time-turner merely exposes this same logic in motion. Prophecy and time are two sides of one coin. Both assure that what will happen has already happened, and what has happened was always meant to be. The magic of the time-turner, then, is not about control, but about awareness, an invitation to glimpse the eternal loop of cause and effect, where understanding replaces power. Harry's use of the time-turner also mirrors his internal growth. Before that night by the lake, he believed that salvation must come from others. his father, his mentors, his friends. But when he sees his own hand create the Patronus, his understanding of identity changes forever. Time does not reveal new events, it reveals truth. The magic of the time turner becomes a metaphor for self-recognition. When Harry says, "I knew I could do it because I'd already seen myself do it," he experiences what philosophers might call temporal enlightenment, the realization that his destiny and his choice are one and the same. The time turner's logic also gives new depth to Dumbledore's most mysterious lines. "You think the dead we loved ever truly leave us?" he once asked. Within a world where time folds back upon itself, the dead do not vanish. They exist in every moment that ever was. Lily's protection of Harry, for example, is not simply a spell cast at one point in time. It is a timeless act of love, reverberating through every second of Harry's life. Her sacrifice becomes the proof that some magic transcends even the laws of time. Love as the one force that holds the circle together. When one looks at Hermione's relationship with the time turner, another layer emerges. She uses it not for heroics, but for study, to attend more classes, to learn more, to live more hours than a normal student could. This quiet use of time manipulation shows a different truth. Knowledge itself is a form of magic that expands one's life without altering its events. The more Hermione learns, the more she sees the interconnection of everything, not as separate lines of time, but as overlapping truths. Her disciplined, almost scientific use of the time turner turns the chaotic idea of time travel into a symbol of intellectual humility. Even the most brilliant witch knows not to play God. The tragedy of the time turner lies in its limits. In Order of the Phoenix, the Ministry of Magic's stock of them is destroyed during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. All the glass shatters, and with it the illusion that humanity, even magical humanity, could command time. The symbolism is unmistakable. The Ministry's destruction of the time turners ends the era of human arrogance. From that point onward, the story of Harry Potter becomes about accepting time's authority rather than bending it. Loss, aging, and death are no longer things to be fixed, but things to be understood. The more one contemplates this, the more one sees that the time turner reveals the moral architecture of the entire wizarding world. Magic, in essence, does not exist to change what is wrong. It exists to illuminate why it had to be. Dumbledore's wisdom: "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love," echoes this truth. The tragedy of time is not that we cannot reverse it, but that we must learn to live meaningfully within it. The time turner, in its delicate gold and fragile chain, teaches precisely that lesson: understanding over control. Even fate's darkest moments reflect this idea. When Snape's memories reveal that he loved Lily long after her death, they show a man trapped in a circle of his own, repeating remorse, reliving loss, incapable of escaping what was. Snape becomes the human embodiment of the time turner's curse. His life loops around the same grief, proving that to tamper with time is not necessary when the heart itself never leaves the past. In this way, Rowling transforms time from a mere narrative tool into a spiritual metaphor. The past is not gone, it is alive within memory, within love, within pain. This also reshapes how we perceive death itself in the series. When Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest to face Voldemort, he accepts death not as an ending, but as a continuation. "Does it hurt?" he asks his parents' shades. "Dying, not at all," James replies, "quicker and easier than falling asleep." In that moment, time dissolves entirely. The present merges with the past. The living stand beside the dead. It is the time-turner's philosophy made real. Time is an illusion of separation. What has been and what is are one and the same. Even Voldemort's downfall follows the same law. His obsession with conquering death, by splitting his soul into Horcruxes, is the final rebellion against the truth of time. He wishes to stop the circle, to anchor himself outside it, but by doing so he becomes fragmented, less than whole, proof that the attempt to master time leads only to disintegration. Harry, by contrast, embraces the circle. He dies and returns, completing the pattern. Time accepts him because he accepts time. Thus, the time-turner becomes not just a magical artifact, but a window into the moral heart of Rowling's world. Magic cannot alter destiny, it can only reveal its design. When Dumbledore tells Hermione and Harry, "You must not be seen, you must be careful," his warning is not about paradoxes, but about reverence. To interfere with the timeline would mean to deny the wisdom that every event, will be even suffering, carries meaning. So when we ask why no one used a time-turner to save Lily and James, or to prevent Cedric's death, or to stop the Battle of Hogwarts, the answer is not a failure of courage or imagination. It is a recognition of the deepest magical truth that everything happens because it must. What must be, Dumbledore once said, echoing an ancient law of both magic and life. In a world where spells can heal wounds and conjure light out of darkness, the one thing that remains sacred, untouchable, is time itself. And perhaps that is why the greatest power in the wizarding world is not the ability to change the past, but the wisdom to understand why it had to happen exactly as it did. Number 21. Dementors, shadows without souls. When we think of Dementors, most imagine cloaked horrors gliding through fog, creatures that feed on happiness and leave behind only despair. But what if these beings are not mere monsters? What if they are the remnants of human souls, fragments of once living people who have lost their bodies, wandering forever in a liminal state between life and death? Their behavior, their eerie sensitivity to human warmth, and their hunger for joy may not be the instincts of beasts at all, but the echoes of a human past. In this light, the Dementor's kiss becomes not a method of killing, but a tragic reunion, the merging of what remains of a soul with the void it once escaped. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Professor Lupin tells Harry, "There's no sense pretending they're not horrible. They feed on every good feeling, every happy memory, until you're left with nothing but the worst experiences of your life." Lupin's words, though factual, are incomplete. He describes the effect but not the origin. The Dementor does not simply take joy, it recognizes it. It seeks warmth the way a starving person seeks food, or perhaps more precisely, as someone who has forgotten the taste of life reaches for it once more. This recognition implies memory. How could a mere creature understand joy enough to consume it unless it had once known joy itself? If we look closer, the theory that Dementors are remnants of human souls gains weight. The kiss of a Dementor is not a violent act in the usual sense. It does not wound the body or spill blood. It draws out the soul, absorbing it into an invisible abyss. The result is a person left alive but empty, a shell moving without purpose. The question then arises, if the Dementor consumes the soul, what becomes of it afterward? Does it vanish, or does it merge with the creature, becoming part of something greater? Could every Dementor then be a host of countless lost souls trapped together in eternal hunger? Consider the words of Cornelius Fudge, who once described the aftermath of a Dementor's kiss. "You can't get it back once they've done it. There's no coming back from that. The finality in his tone suggests more than mere loss. It hints at an irreversible joining, a consuming so complete that the two entities, the human soul and the Dementor, cease to be separate. It's a form of spiritual absorption, not destruction. In that case, every new victim does not simply die, they become part of the Dementor's ever-growing shadow. There's also something haunting in the way Dementors sense human presence. They do not rely on sight or sound. They move toward warmth, emotion, and life itself. They are drawn to what they no longer possess. In Order of the Phoenix, when two Dementors attack Harry and Dudley, the narrative describes a change in the air, a chill that penetrated to the bone, and then the sensation of hopelessness that made it impossible to think. This is not just the chill of death, it's the echo of memory. The Dementors react to human life like a ghost reacts to the memory of its past home. They are not predators searching for prey, they are exiles seeking what was lost. A fascinating parallel exists between Dementors and the ghosts of Hogwarts. Both are incorporeal beings tied to emotion. Nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost, once explained, "I was afraid of death. I chose to remain behind. I sometimes wonder whether I oughtn't have." Ghosts linger because of attachment, fear, regret, or unfulfilled longing. Dementors, by contrast, linger for the opposite reason. They are bound not by love or fear, but by emptiness. Where ghosts cling to a memory of life, Dementors cling to the absence of it. Hogwarts has its spirits of remembrance, Azkaban has its spirits of despair. Both are consequences of human emotion, frozen in different forms. The first recorded appearance of Dementors in wizarding history coincides suspiciously with the rise of Azkaban itself. The fortress existed long before it became a prison, built upon an island steeped in dark magic. Some historians, like Eldred Warple, speculated that the creatures were born of the anguish of those who perished in the depths of that cursed rock. It's possible that Azkaban, saturated with suffering and death, gave birth to the Dementors through sheer emotional residue. Every tortured prisoner, every hopeless cry might have contributed to forming these shadows. And if the first war against Voldemort left thousands dead, the surge of death and despair across the wizarding world could have strengthened them, multiplied them, given them form. Voldemort himself understood the value of fear as nourishment. His rise plunged the magical world into a near-constant state of dread. Could that collective emotion have served as sustenance, or even as fuel for the creation of new Dementors? When Fudge described how the Dementors breed in Order of the Phoenix, it was a chilling statement. How does a creature without a body breed? Not in the physical sense, certainly, but perhaps they multiply through the propagation of despair. Every act of mass suffering, every war or tragedy could give birth to more of them. Fear becomes the seed, hopelessness, the soil. Harry's encounters with Dementors are unique because he feels their effect more intensely than others. Lupin explains it's due to the horrors of his past, but perhaps it's more than that. Perhaps Harry's connection to death, the night his parents were murdered, makes him more visible to them. Dementors, being fragments of lost souls, may recognize in Harry the lingering mark of death that resides within him through his connection to Voldemort. They see not just a boy, but a vessel containing a piece of another's soul, and they are drawn to that echo. The Patronus charm, that silvery guardian of happiness, becomes far more symbolic when seen through this lens. The spell does not destroy Dementors. It drives them away with the memory of pure emotion. It is, in essence, a confrontation between living and lost souls. When Harry conjures his stag, he does not attack. He reminds the Dementors of what they have lost, the warmth of life, the clarity of love. The light of a Patronus is the reflection of an unbroken spirit, and that is precisely what the Dementors cannot endure. If we think about Azkaban itself, the prison is not merely guarded by Dementors, it belongs to them. It is their home, their sanctuary. The wizards who send prisoners there are not using these creatures as guards, they are feeding them. Each inmate becomes a vessel of misery, ensuring the Dementors never starve. Over decades, these beings have become so intertwined with Azkaban that the very stones seem to radiate cold. It's as if the souls of all who died there fused with the creatures until the fortress became a monument to eternal despair. The connection between Dementors and death becomes even clearer when we look at the spectral imagery that surrounds them. J.K. Rowling describes them as hooded, gliding figures with rotting hands and a rattling breath. This decay hints at something that was once alive. A ghost, though translucent, retains the image of its human form. A Dementor, in contrast, is the corruption of that image, a body half forgotten, shape blurred by time. Their facelessness represents the loss of identity, the stripping away of what made them human. They are humanity erased, but not extinguished. It is no coincidence that Dumbledore, a wizard of extraordinary understanding, was deeply uncomfortable with the Ministry's reliance on Dementors. He once said, "You cannot give them power without losing control yourself." His warning wasn't just political, it was metaphysical. To use Dementors as tools is to weaponize despair, to align oneself with the force of unfulfilled death. Dumbledore likely recognized that each Dementor is not a separate creature but a fragment of a collective misery. To command them is to invite that misery into one's world. If we follow this reasoning, the Dementor's disappearance after Voldemort's final defeat becomes deeply symbolic. The moment the Dark Lord fell, the wizarding world felt relief, unity, and hope for the first time in decades. That wave of collective joy might have starved the Dementors, dissolving them back into the void from which they came. Happiness and peace, the very emotions they could not endure, became their undoing. It was not a battle that destroyed them, but the healing of the world itself. The idea that Dementors are fragments of human souls challenges the boundaries between life and death in the wizarding world. They blur the line between ghost and monster, between memory and hunger. They remind us that despair, left unchecked, can outlive the body. Perhaps that is the true horror they represent, not the cold they bring, but the truth they embody. That even a soul can lose itself so completely that it becomes a shadow, forever seeking the warmth it once knew. And maybe, in some tragic way, that is why Harry, when facing them, never hated them. He feared them, yes, but he also pitied them. When he cast his Patronus, he wasn't destroying evil. He was offering mercy to something that had long forgotten what mercy felt like. Number 22. The Wand That Chooses. When Garrick Ollivander first spoke the words "the wand chooses the wizard," readers accepted it as a mysterious rule of the magical world, something sacred, something unquestionable. Yet beneath this phrase lies a deeper and far stranger truth. What if wands do not choose based on the wizard's soul, courage, or destiny, but on something more fragile and intimate, memory? Every wand, after all, is born from something once alive, the wood of a tree and the core of a creature. Both have known emotion, fear, and instinct. They remember. And in that memory lies their connection to the wizard who first holds them. Wands in the world of Harry Potter are not passive instruments. Ollivander himself described them as quasi-sentient, capable of learning and adapting. But the key to understanding this sentience might not be intelligence at all, but recollection. Consider the wand of Harry Potter, Holly and Phoenix Feather. The same Phoenix Fawkes gave another feather, one that became the core of Lord Voldemort's U-wand. This duality is more than coincidence. It represents two echoes of the same source, split between creation and destruction, love and fear. When the twin cores met during the duel in the graveyard in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the wands refused to fight. They remembered. The memory of the Phoenix's song and the shared core recognized its twin, not through logic, but through the deep echo of a shared past. This idea reshapes everything we know about wand lore. The duel in Little Hangleton's graveyard is not merely an act of magic colliding with magic. It is the meeting of two memories that once belonged to the same creature. The result, priori incantatem, revealed the past spells of Voldemort's wand, forming ghostly echoes of his victims. Yet one might ask, why did these echoes appear in this moment? Because the wand itself was remembering. It released its own recollections, the imprints of pain and death still clinging to its core. The phoenix feather, once a living thing, could no longer bear the weight of its history when confronted by the same song. It had once known. This connection between memory and magic surfaces again when Harry takes Draco Malfoy's wand during the events of Deathly Hallows. Ollivander later explains that a wand can change allegiance when its master is disarmed, but perhaps this change is not merely about ownership. Perhaps it is about emotional imprint. The wand learns the rhythm of the one who wields it, their rage, their compassion, their doubt. When Harry takes Draco's wand, it bends toward him not only because he won, but because it recognizes in him a familiar current of conflicted emotion, the same kind of fear, courage that lived once in Draco. Wands, then, might not serve power, they serve what they know. Throughout the saga, wands behave as though they carry memory. When Ron Weasley breaks his wand in Chamber of Secrets, its magic turns wild and unpredictable. It backfires, it misfires, it spits out slugs. This chaos is not random, it is confusion. The wand's memory is damaged. It no longer recognizes the intention of the wizard it once obeyed. Later, when Ron gets a new wand, his spells stabilize, as if the new wand learns his nature afresh. The process mirrors human relationships, fragile bonds built through shared moments, strengthened by emotion and routine. Voldemort's failure to understand this truth becomes his undoing. Obsessed with mastering the Elder Wand, he assumes control over it through possession and murder. Yet the wand refuses to truly serve him. Dumbledore once warned, "You cannot claim mastery by taking, you must earn it." The Elder Wand does not simply calculate allegiance, it remembers. It holds the grief of Dumbledore, the ambition of Grindelwald, the desperation of Antioch Peverell, and within its ancient wood sleeps the memory of every triumph and betrayal that ever touched it. When Voldemort uses it to strike down Harry, the wand remembers. It recognizes the boy who once stood in front of death without hatred. It chooses mercy, not power. Harry's victory, then, is not only about strength or purity, it is about memory recognizing its rightful bearer. The Elder Wand bends to Harry not because he killed its master, but because it feels the echo of something it has long known, the selfless magic of love. When Harry holds the wand at the end of Deathly Hallows, it is as if all the wands that ever touched him, his own Holly Wand, Draco's, the Elder Wand, align in harmony, forming a chorus of remembered spells. They sense in him what magic was meant to serve, not dominance, but compassion. The idea that wands remember also explains the strange behavior of the twin cores during Goblet of Fire. When the phoenix feather wands locked together, a golden thread of light formed between them. Out of this connection emerged echoes of the dead, Cedric Diggory, Bertha Jorkins, Frank Bryce, Harry's parents. This was not a trick of magic alone. It was the wand's memory brought to life. It remembered each death it had caused and momentarily gave voice to those memories. Priori incantatem, often seen as a mechanical effect, might in fact be a phenomenon of recollection, the wand replaying the imprint of its own past actions. Even the relationship between Harry and his wand in Deathly Hallows illustrates the intimacy of this memory bond. When his holly wand is broken, he feels genuine grief, as though he has lost a friend. He later uses a fragment of its splintered core to fix it with the elder wand, and the restored wand responds with warmth. That warmth is more than satisfaction, it is recognition. The wand remembers his touch, his fear, his triumph. In that moment it becomes a living chronicle of his journey, carrying within it every charm and curse, every act of defiance and love. This pattern repeats throughout the wizarding world. Consider Neville Longbottom's transformation. Early in the series, his wand, inherited from his father, often fails him. Spells misfire, charms fizzle. Only later, when he receives a wand of his own, does his magic flourish. The difference is not technical, it is emotional. The first wand bore the memories of another man's life, the courage of Frank Longbottom, his agony under torture. It could not yet recognize Neville's uncertain heart. But the new wand, blank and receptive, learned from Neville himself, his fear, his growth, his eventual bravery at the Battle of Hogwarts. When Neville draws the sword of Gryffindor, the wand in his hand glows fiercely, almost as if it too has been waiting for this moment, remembering all the courage he never believed he had. Luna Lovegood's wand offers another subtle example. Described as pale with a resemblance to her personality, it performs spells of gentleness and illumination rather than aggression. Luna's wand responds best to her emotional energy, serene, unwavering, kind. It remembers her belief in the impossible, her acceptance of the strange. When she casts her Patronus, a hare, it emerges effortlessly. The wand recalls every time she looked beyond fear and saw beauty instead. In this way, it is not Luna who chooses the wand, but the wand that remembers her essence even before she realizes it herself. This connection between wands and emotion aligns them closer to Horcruxes than one might wish to admit. Both store fragments of a wizard's essence. The difference lies in the nature of what they store. A Horcrux imprisons a soul through murder, binding memory in agony. A wand, by contrast, absorbs emotion through experience, binding memory in companionship. Ollivander hinted at this when he said, "Wands are complex. They may learn from their masters and transfer loyalty if won." To learn implies memory. To transfer loyalty implies remembrance strong enough to recognize a new pattern. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry dreams of the corridor in the Department of Mysteries, he sees rooms devoted to thought, time, and memory. Magic itself seems structured around recollection. Dumbledore uses the pensieve to store memories. Even ghosts are described as imprints left by the soul. The wizarding world is saturated with the idea that magic leaves a trace. It is therefore no stretch to imagine that wand, extensions of a wizard's will, act as repositories for these traces, carrying the history of every spell ever cast. If wands indeed choose by memory, it explains why Voldemort's attempt to use another's wand, Lucius Malfoy's, fails so miserably. The wand remembers the hand that wielded it for years with pride and fear. In Voldemort's grasp, it hesitates, uncertain. It knows it does not belong to him. The result is catastrophic. It cannot defeat Harry's wand, and Voldemort grows desperate. This moment is not weakness in craftsmanship. It is a clash of memories. The wand cannot betray the emotional imprint it carries, no matter who commands it. The very core of wand lore, then, rests on remembrance. Wood and core together form a vessel capable of empathy through memory. Harry's holly wand, a symbol of protection and rebirth, remembers the boy who used it to cast his first Patronus against despair. The elder wand, carved from elder wood, tree associated with death, remembers every hand that sought to control it and every heart that failed. Yet in the end, when Harry returns it to Dumbledore's tomb, it rests. The memories finally sleep. The phrase "the wand chooses the wizard" thus transforms into something more profound. The wand remembers the wizard. It does not merely sense potential, it recognizes emotional resonance, a reflection of what once was. When Harry takes the Elder Wand, he does not seize control of the world's most powerful weapon. He is recognized by it. It feels in him not ambition, but forgiveness, the same energy that once radiated from the phoenix whose feather binds his first wand. And so memory, not mastery, decides allegiance. Magic, in the end, belongs to those who remember, and to those who are remembered. Number 23, the magic of music. In the wizarding world created by J.K. Rowling, music appears rarely, yet whenever it does, it carries a meaning far deeper than simple entertainment. Each time it surfaces, it feels like a forgotten echo of something ancient, something sacred, as though sound itself remembers what words and spells have long forgotten. When the Sorting Hat bursts into song, it does not merely amuse the students. It becomes the voice of Hogwarts, a being older than any of its inhabitants, whispering warnings and truths through rhythm and rhyme. Its song is a form of prophecy, a spell hidden in melody. The Hat's verses change each year, reflecting the shifting balance of the school's heart. "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see," it begins. Yet what follows often carries a note of warning, an awareness of the coming darkness. This is not coincidence. The Hat's music is magic, not in the mechanical sense of wand work, but in something much more primal. It resonates with the collective soul of the castle. Dumbledore, who always seemed to understand the invisible language of sound, once asked the entire school to sing the Hogwarts anthem in whatever tune they like. The result, described by Rowling with gentle humour, was a great babble of sound where each student followed a different rhythm. And yet Dumbledore beamed, conducting the chaos with joy. What looked like noise to others was, in truth, a magical harmony of freedom, an expression of individuality woven into unity. It was as if he wanted to remind them that in diversity lies power, that the heart of Hogwarts beats strongest when many voices sing as one. The scene is brief, but it is profoundly symbolic. The old wizard's delight in that discordant chorus is not the amusement of a teacher watching children sing. It is the recognition of a deeper law, that music, like magic, thrives on emotion, not perfection. When we look closer, we realize that music in Rowling's universe is always connected with truth, emotion, or death, the three great forces that define both humanity and wizardry. The Mermaid's song during the Triwizard Tournament is haunting and beautiful, but only when heard underwater. Above the surface, it is described as a horrible screeching, unlistenable and raw. That transformation is the essence of magical sound. Meaning depends on perception. Those who cannot breathe in the world of magic will hear only noise, but those who descend into its depths, like Harry, will discover a melody that carries ancient sorrow and warning. The mermaids sing not for beauty, but for remembrance, keeping alive the voices of the drowned and forgotten. The scene forces us to see how even a song can serve as a barrier between worlds, one that only true understanding can cross. The Phoenix's song, however, is where Rowling's vision of musical magic becomes pure and transcendent. When Fawkes appears in the Chamber of Secrets, his arrival is not marked by flame or spell, but by sound. A sudden, thrilling, beautiful sound, Rowling writes, that made Harry's heart feel as though it was swelling to twice its normal size. That music gives Harry courage when he is alone, surrounded by death and fear. The bird's song does not cast a spell in the usual sense. It doesn't bind or control. It heals, it strengthens. It is a resonance that responds to suffering. Later, Dumbledore himself explains that Phoenix song is magical. It can bring hope to the pure of heart and despair to the wicked. In that moment, the idea of magic itself expands. It is no longer just energy channeled through a wand. It is vibration, emotion, life. It is art made real. Phoenix song is heard by those who are ready to listen, Dumbledore once said. In a line Rowling wrote as if to test the reader's own readiness, the statement suggests that sound in the wizarding world operates as a moral mirror. It reveals rather than performs. It is selective in its audience. Only those whose hearts are open, like Harry's, can truly hear it. When Voldemort later attacks Hogwarts and Fawkes's song rises again above the chaos, it feels less like music and more like the soul of the school itself crying out. That cry carries memory, the voices of those lost, the courage of those still standing. It is as though Hogwarts itself sings through the Phoenix, binding the living and the dead in one final harmony. The centaurs, too, speak of the music of the spheres, the cosmic harmony that guides fate. They look at the stars and hear patterns humans cannot perceive. In their wisdom lies the unspoken truth that all magic, even prophecy, is built on rhythm. Each planet moves like a note in an endless celestial symphony, and to those who can hear it, destiny is not chaos but melody. Firenze, when he speaks to Harry in the forest, implies that the universe hums with purpose. The centaurs are not just astrologers, they are musicians of the cosmos, listening to the song of creation itself. This again links Rowling's world to something ancient, to Pythagoras, and his belief that numbers and harmony were the language of the divine. Even the darker side of the wizarding world acknowledges this connection. The song of the mermaids is beautiful but siren-like. It warns and tempts at once. The Weasley twins singing Valentine that embarrasses Harry in the Chamber of Secrets may seem comic, yet it plays on the same principle. Words become spells when charged with emotion. A rhyme, a rhythm, even a silly tune all contain potential energy. It is telling that every major magical institution in the books, Hogwarts, Beauxbaton, Durmstrang, celebrates its identity with song. To sing is to affirm existence. The wizarding world does not need symphonies or operas because every act of magic, every incantation already has the rhythm of poetry. Even the Latin of spells carries the cadence of verse. Wingardium Leviosa is not a command, it is a chant, rising and falling like music. The same principle reveals itself in Parseltongue, the language of snakes. To a non-speaker it sounds like hissing, an eerie, serpentine rhythm. Yet to Harry it becomes melody, communication, meaning. Here again, Rowling blurs the line between language and song. Magic flows not from words themselves, but from the tones in which they are spoken. That is why wandless magic, like the Phoenix's song or Dumbledore's laughter, feels more powerful, not less. It comes from a place beyond the intellect, from the vibration of being itself. In such moments, magic and music are indistinguishable. At funerals in the series, music often appears without instruments, as if the air itself remembers how to mourn. When Dumbledore dies, Rowling describes a sound like music as phoenix song echoes across the lake. It is grief turned into resonance. The song becomes a thread connecting Harry's heart to something eternal. It suggests that in the wizarding world, death is not silence but transformation, a modulation from one key to another. Life continues, but in a different tone. That concept, though never stated openly, underpins the emotional architecture of the entire saga. What makes these moments unforgettable is not their rarity, but their precision. Rowling uses music sparingly because she understands that too much sound dulls meaning. Each time music appears, it touches the sacred, the Sorting Hat's prophecy, the Phoenix's lament, the mermaid's dirge, the centaur's cosmic harmony. Together they form an invisible symphony that spans all 7 books. To read them attentively is to hear that music behind the words. It is a reminder that magic is not invention, but remembrance, a rediscovery of what the world has always sung. The true essence of magical music lies in its refusal to obey rules. Dumbledore's chaotic choir, each student singing at their own rhythm, reflects the soul of Hogwarts itself. Unpredictable, imperfect, alive. That image captures Rowling's entire philosophy of magic. Not order, but harmony within disorder. It is a human lesson disguised as humor. The more one seeks to control magic, the more it escapes definition. But those who embrace its rhythm, who let themselves feel rather than think, find power in simplicity. Harry, more than any other character, embodies that. He never studies music, yet his life is shaped by it, by lullabies of loss, by songs of courage, by the cry of a bird that never dies. Even the ghosts of Hogwarts, though silent in most scenes, belong to this unending melody. They are echoes, sustained notes in a song that refuses to end. Nearly headless Nick's melancholy presence, the fat friar's cheerfulness, the grey lady's mournful tone, all contribute to the music of the castle. It is as though Hogwarts itself breathes in harmony, every corridor and portrait humming faintly with centuries of sound, and in the heart of it all stands the great hall, where candles float like notes in the air, and young voices chant spells that might as well be lyrics to an ancient hymn. When Fawkes disappears for the last time, leaving behind only a faint echo of his song, it feels as if a chord has finally resolved. The silence that follows is not empty but full, the way silence lingers after a great symphony ends. Rowling never explains where the Phoenix goes, but we can guess. Perhaps to another place where music and magic are one, where souls continue to sing beyond words. That is the secret heartbeat of her world, that every spell, every sound, every heartbeat is part of the same ancient vibration and the music of life itself. In the end, the wizarding world does not need art galleries or concert halls. It lives inside the music of existence, in every whispering tree of the forbidden forest, in the rustle of pages in the library, in the flutter of wings over the castle towers. Theirs is a world where every sound matters, where even silence has tone. And perhaps that is why magic, in Rowling's universe, never feels like a trick or illusion. It feels like music, invisible, eternal, and heard only by those who are ready to listen. Number 24. The Phoenix, Guide Between Worlds. When Fawkes descended into the Chamber of Secrets, the boy lying on the stone floor was already close to death. The basilisk's venom was spreading fast through Harry Potter's veins, and everything around him shimmered in a fog of pain and despair. Yet from that darkness came the sound of wings, gentle and burning with light. Fawkes landed beside him, his feathers glowing like embers of another world. The tears that fell onto Harry's wound were not just medicine, they were a passage, a bridge between the realms of life and death. Rowling wrote, "The Phoenix's tears healed the wound on Harry's arm," but behind that simple description hid something profound. It was the first time Harry truly crossed the threshold between existence and the void, and returned, carrying the mark of someone who had seen what lay beyond. The basilisk's venom was fatal, and no ordinary creature could have reversed its curse. Yet Fawkes appeared at the exact moment when hope was lost, not summoned by spell or command, but drawn by destiny itself. He arrived as if answering an invisible call, a whisper that connected him to something older than Hogwarts or Dumbledore. When he dropped the sorting hat before Harry, it was not merely a gift, it was an initiation. The sword within represented courage, yes, but also sacrifice. And as Fawkes cried his tears upon the boy, it was as though he baptized Harry in fire and water at once, anointing him for the path that awaited him. The Phoenix did not just heal. He prepared Harry to walk between worlds. From that day onward, Fawkes became the unseen companion of Harry's soul. He appeared again only when the line between light and darkness blurred, most vividly at Dumbledore's death. The great hall was silent, the candles dimmed, and the air trembled with loss. Then came the cry, piercing and pure, echoing through the castle stones. Rowling describes it as a lament, unlike any sound that Harry had ever heard. That cry was not grief alone, it was release. It was the song of a soul returning home. Fawkes was there not as a pet mourning its master, but as a guide escorting Dumbledore's spirit through the veil. His flight across the sky was like a spark of eternity vanishing into the clouds, reminding all who heard him that death in the wizarding world was never final. There is an ancient belief that the Phoenix is not a creature of one life, but many. Each time it burns, it remembers. Each rebirth is a continuation, not a beginning. Fawkes, in that sense, was older than any wizard alive. He had watched countless generations rise and fall. He belonged to the eternal rhythm of transformation. His connection to Dumbledore and later to Harry was part of that rhythm. They were all participants in the same mystery, the passage through death toward renewal. It is no coincidence that the Order of the Phoenix was named after him. Dumbledore did not simply choose a symbol of resilience. He chose a being that embodied the very nature of the fight against evil, a fight that required dying to one's old self to be reborn as something stronger. When Dumbledore fell from the astronomy tower, time itself seemed to pause. The golden light around the body, the whisper of robes, the stillness before Fawkes began to sing, all of it resembled a ritual, not a tragedy. Fawkes's lament turned the scene into something sacred. The Phoenix's voice bridged the living and the dead, offering comfort not through words, but through vibration, a sound that carried memory, loss, and transcendence. Even as Harry stood frozen, unable to cry, that song spoke for him. It reminded him, and the reader, that what dies in one form continues in another. Later, in the white silence of King's Cross, when Harry met Dumbledore once more, the atmosphere carried the same quality as Fawkes's lament. The brightness was warm, weightless, and infinite. Dumbledore's tone was tender and filled with a strange serenity. He said, "Do not pity the dead, Harry, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." These words echoed like the Phoenix's song, gentle, reassuring, yet filled with truth that transcends mortal fear. King's Cross was not heaven or earth. It was the space between, the very realm where Fawkes moved freely. Harry was there as one of them, a soul on the threshold, not yet ready to leave. It is here that the deeper meaning of the phoenix reveals itself. The creature does not simply symbolize immortality, it embodies transition. The rebirth is only the visible side of something much greater, the transformation of essence. Every time Fawkes burst into flame, the fire did not destroy but purified. In that burning, everything unnecessary was shed, leaving only truth. This is precisely what happens to Harry when he faces Voldemort in the forest. By allowing himself to die, he sheds the fear, the ego, and the illusions of power. What returns afterward is not the same boy who entered the forest, but someone reborn in spirit, someone like the phoenix, who has walked through death and emerged radiant.